give you thanks and praise on this day. And Lord, we ask that you bless us as we meditate upon this holy word and as we learn what it means to follow you. Lord, we give you thanks and praise, and we ask that you bless the words of our mouths and the thoughts of our minds. May all that we do and all that we say be holy and acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Through Christ our Lord we pray. Amen. I don't know if you've ever had an opportunity to witness this, but I know that I love witnessing people come to faith. Now, sometimes they just learn to suddenly own their faith. Maybe they'd always gone to church with their parents, but their faith was really their parents. And then one day, their faith becomes their own. I love witnessing people come to faith. And then, sometimes I see people who spend their whole entire lives thinking that this whole God thing isn't really for them. This God thing, those Christians, they're just plain weird, and this whole God thing, I'm not sure about it. And then one day they have a spiritual experience that they can't explain, that they have a hard time articulating, and it transforms their lives. It doesn't matter how it happens, when it does, when I get to witness people come to faith, when we feel our own experience of truly coming to faith, it's absolutely phenomenal. Now I'm going to tell you a story about someone who started this journey of faith in a magnificent way. Now, of course, since these sermons go online, I'm going to change this person's name to Phil. So we're going to talk about somebody named Phil today. And Phil was a lot like the rest of us. He grew up in church. How many people here grew up in church? Most of us? Yep, pretty much everybody. So he grew up in church. His family, had always gone to church rather regularly. I mean, not every single Sunday, but the majority of the Sundays throughout the year. So he was used to going to church. He called himself a Christian. I mean, after all, he did go to a Christian church on Sunday mornings. But his faith, that's about all that it was. His faith was going to church on Sunday mornings. That was it. Going to church for 1 hour on Sunday mornings. That was about as wide as his faith reached. And then one day, Phil had a spiritual experience. It was one that he can't really put words to. It's one that might be hard to understand if you've never had an experience like this, but he just had a spiritual experience. He just felt God's love surrounding him. Where he just felt the love of God envelop him. He just had this experience where he truly felt God, and in that moment, his life was changed forever. Though he had always gone to church, the next Sunday when he went to church, he decided that he actually listened to what the preacher had to say. He decided that instead of just sitting there twiddling his thumb, waiting for time to go by, he would actually pay attention to the pastor, and that maybe he'd get something from the pastor's message. And then on that Sunday, as he's listening to the pastor is preaching a message, and the pastor says, Jesus is waiting. Waiting for you, waiting for me, waiting for all of us. Jesus is waiting and ready to lead you. Jesus is on the line. All you have to do is pick up the phone and follow him. Now, this happened right after his profound religious experience, and so Phil's faith suddenly felt personal. But even though his moment of transformation was extremely personal, it actually transformed him into a much less selfish man. And that's one thing that makes this story so remarkable to me. You see, before Phil's spiritual experience, he always thought that the world and that his faith revolved around him. It was all about him. He went to church if he thought, he kind of wanted to. He would worship God if he thought he would get something out of it, if it would be beneficial to him. He went to church on Sunday mornings if he had the energy to do it, if he wasn't too exhausted from partying the night before. That was what his life looked like before he had this spiritual experience. But then, the spiritual experience where his faith suddenly felt personal and where he was compelled to follow this man named Jesus. This man who's unlike any other man. Jesus. And his life suddenly changed. So Phil started to read the Gospels. He started to read the Gospels, and this reading too. Who knows, it may have even been that reading that was there on that Sunday morning. And suddenly going to church wasn't the same anymore. He still went to church. He actually went to church more often. He went to church not just when his parents wanted him to go to church, but he went to church just because, it was what he wanted to do. He wanted to go. And he went to church and he started to pray more, and he went to church so that he could worship with his heart and with his soul and with his mind, with all of his strength. And he went to church so that he could learn something. He had a very gifted preacher at the time who would always give him something to think about. And so he'd take that thing, that little bit of knowledge that that preacher would give him on Sunday morning, and he would carry it with him throughout the week. And he learned that being a Christian, that following Christ, isn't about what his faith will do for him. It's about what his faith can inspire him to do for others. It's about him making this world a better place. Now, you heard me say that he had this personal experience with God, but even though his faith was suddenly personal, it led him to be more selfless. It led him to do more for others than he had ever done before in his life. I truly love watching people suddenly, have their eyes open to faith, when suddenly everything that they thought that faith was about, everything that they thought that church was about is just kind of like blown up. And when suddenly they have this personal, this transforming experience. I love watching it because I see people go from being mostly self-centered, mostly self-pleasing, to suddenly caring, compassionate, philanthropic people. I watch people go from being like everybody else in this world who puts themselves first to being a bit more like Jesus. It amazes me when I read the Gospels. We just read through this Gospel account. And the first three Gospels tell the story rather similarly. The Gospel of John, as those of you who attend Bible studies, a little bit different. In case you didn't know this, only 8% of the Gospel of John is actually found in the other three Synoptic Gospels. So, of course, the accounts are going to be different. But in all, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and they tell this story about Jesus, going to the fishermen. Going there and having them follow him and become his new disciples. And it amazes me, at least when I read through this, because, at first I read through the Gospel of Mark as I was preparing for this week, and this is a story we all know. So a lot of times you kind of just skim through it, you know what I mean? You know the story, so you just read through it kind of quickly. But I decided, okay, let's really compare it to the other Gospels. And Mark was the first Gospel written. It's the shortest Gospel, so I was thinking, did Mark leave something out? Is he not telling us? Because in this story, Jesus walks up to these fishermen. He gives them this amazing thing. He says, okay, put your nets back in the water, catch a whole gaggle of fish, and this amazing thing happens. And then he says, okay, now leave all of that behind. Everything, even the fish I just got you to catch, leave all that behind and follow me. And I was like, are we missing something? Look throughout the other Gospels, and we're not. There doesn't seem to be anything missing. So these men, in an instance, and I'm saying men because of course it was men, all men at that time, these men at this instance, they witnessed this, they witnessed Jesus, and for no apparent reason, they just felt their hearts compelled to leave everything that they had. Two of the men leave their father in the boat. Of course, he had other people with him, but they just leave everything that they know, everything that they have, and they just follow Jesus. It's amazing. It's really that simple. But do you notice how, and I think that the Gospels, especially the Gospel of Luke, would have included this, had this actually happened. But do you notice that in selfish. If we want to get somewhere in life, we've got to put who first? Me first. If I'm going to get somewhere in life, I'm going to put me above everybody else. Think about, I'm going to give you an example of Steve Jobs. I know there's plenty of people who love Apple products. I don't want to, diss Steve Jobs or your Apple products. But, Steve Jobs is the creator of Apple, who passed away a few years ago. And, at the beginning of his career, when he was first starting out, he had his partner who actually built the computers, who actually did the hard work. And, they work together, they sell this product, and then Steve goes back to his partner, and his partner asks him, oh, well, how much did we make? And he lies. He tells them that they made less than they actually did, so that he could keep more money to himself. So often in this world, we learn that it's okay to be selfish. It's okay to put ourselves first. If we want to be successful, then we are supposed to put ourselves first. But then we meet this man named Jesus. We meet this man named Jesus, this Son of God, and suddenly we learn that, putting ourselves first is no way to live. Putting ourselves first is no way to live at all. This phrase for joy here comes from the Amish community. Do me a favor and read this with me. Jesus first, ourselves, yourself last. I'm glad I had you read it with me because I read it incorrectly. Jesus first, others second, yourself last. I think that I love when I witness people coming to faith, because I love how suddenly they go from being primarily selfish being to caring more about others than they do about themselves. That's a remarkable thing about following Jesus. When we follow Jesus, suddenly it's not about us anymore. If we're really, truly following who Jesus, who the Christ is, it's not about us anymore. It's about loving God and loving others. That is what it's all about. Once we start to follow Jesus, we realize that service to others is the most important thing that we can do. And you know what? We realize that when serving others, it's also really fulfilling. Think about have you ever had that, you wanted something really bad? Anybody here, especially to back to a kid, you ever want something really bad? I don't know, a car? I don't know. Think of something. I'm bad at this game. Think about something that you want really, really bad, and then you buy that thing. Think about a kid. A kid wants a toy really bad, and then they buy that toy. They play with it for a little while. They think it's fulfilling that need that they have inside of them. But then suddenly that need wants more. Inside of them, it fulfills a little bit, but then they want more and they want more. If you're a kid, you get a toy, you think it's amazing, you play with it for a day, and then suddenly it's tucked in a basket somewhere. Or you're a person, you get a car, and you get this new car, you think it's awesome, you love it, and then you're driving it around all the time, you're like, well, why isn't this fulfilling that need that I have inside of me? It's because we all have that need inside of ourselves. But if we're just being selfish, then we're never going to fulfill that need, because fulfilling that voice that's crying out inside of us is only fulfilled when we are serving others. Think about parenting. To me, I don't know about you, but parenting is the most sacrificial thing I have ever done in my life. It's a lot more sacrificial than any mission trip I have ever gone on. I've done those with little sleep too, parenting is the most sacrificial thing you've ever done, but it's also the most rewarding. Absolutely the most rewarding. Before you have kids, for me, before I had kids, I needed 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. It was I would actually calculate to make sure I was going to have 8 hours of sleep, or I knew I was going to need a lot of coffee the next day. And then you become a parent and sleep. Yeah, you know what I mean. Now suddenly Taylor in the other room behind a closed door can whisper, Mommy, I gotta go potty. At like 4 a.m. It's literally that quiet. Behind a closed door in the other room, and I hear her. It's a sacrificial thing. Jesus told his disciples to follow him, he told them immediately that he was going to put them to work. And they didn't turn around. Now I'm going to tell you a story. Anybody here ever read the book Have a Little Faith by Mitch Albom? It's also in a movie. Okay, good. Barely anybody. I think one person had read it in the first service. And so in this book, Have a Little Faith, and it's also out in a movie done by Hallmark. It's amazing. I absolutely love Mitch Albom's books too, by the way. So the whole book's about Mitch Albom interviewing his rabbi, who's Rabbi Albert Lewis, and then a pastor. Unfortunately, both of these men have since passed away. But Rabbi Albert Lewis, he tells the stories. He's talking to Mitch. He says when a baby comes into the world, its hands are clenched. Why? Because the baby, not knowing any better, wants to grab everything to say the whole world is mine. But when an old person dies, how does he do so? With his hands open. Why? Because he's learned his lesson. We can take nothing with us. Friends, when we truly begin to devote our lives to God, that's what following Jesus is all about. We go from wanting more